Hello and welcome back to Blood for Flowers by M.C.McNeel. That's me. So come with me now on a journey through time and space as we go back to ancient Greece. And this is chapter 25, Blood for Flowers. Oh God, make sure I'm looking pro. Something's up with my hair. Okay. Here we go. And remember, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I appreciate you. Chapter 25. The ships drew ever closer to Themyscira's west coast, here upon the dark seas, under a blanket of endless stars cast across the blackness of the heavens. Admiral Vasha and his navigators saw no sign of Thracian ships of war upon the horizon. The mighty Spartan ships sailed on with their most precious cargo, the women of Themyscira, whom, in fact, the majority of were with child, some even carrying twin fetuses in their nourishing womb. But here these warrior mothers were dressed and ready for battle. Here many of the Spartan crew warriors themselves were thankful for the peace between these two nations, as the fighting men of Sparta did not like the thought of having to wage war against these beautiful, deadly women, who were all opposing in stature, commanding of will, eyes as piercing and sharp as an eagle, possessing and displaying the heart of a lion with the fierce look of a pack of hungry wolves. Though these women were to these men charming and delightful, they also knew them to be clever and cunning. In a word, dangerous. Oh, hapless the armies that make war upon these brave ladies, was the thought of Viacles as he sat in his quarters below deck going over a document he entreated the Queen of Themyscira to sign. This was a new proclamation of peace between the two nations, who had no contact with one another according to the 100-year peace treaty. Here now, lo, these many decades later, the two great nations had come together in Sparta in more ways than one. And Queen Thera herself was delighted by this momentous occasion, made even sweeter, having the king of Sparta's child growing strong in her belly. This new treaty of peace and allegiance would ensure her daughter would have a fast ally in her father, the king of Sparta. Now, as Queen Thera signed her name in squid's ink upon the parchment, the terrible thought occurred to her. But what if I bear him a son? Queen Thera banished this horrible thought from her mind as it quickly came. Then, from above, all those gathered in the king's stateroom heard the call, "Land ho!" Queen Thera rushed from the room, flying up the ladder to the deck, where she and her ladies gathered again at the bow of each ship, where clearly they saw there in the night the ancient fortified walls of Themyscira, where the torches were lit up at each watchtower, a soft, faint spark on the horizon, but not so far away that the women could not recognize their home. So they shouted great noises of jubilation, their homesick hearts lifted and filled with joy. Now any fear of threat of war from Thrace was dashed upon the rocks as they sailed closer, for the Spartan crew and warrior women of Themyscira clearly saw no Thracian ships in the still waters of the cove. Oh, thank God. The king of Sunder's wife kept him in check. Now, here, shouting voices in distress could be heard coming from the walls as the officers stationed along the watchtowers did not recognize these foreign ships of war. Now, just before a slew of deadly arrows were to be let loose on command, the defenders of the ancient walls heard, coming out from across the water, the rhythmic beating of swords against shield. Queen Thera led her women in this, as the sound grew louder and louder in rhythmic beating, which was a sign unto the defenders of the walls of Themyscira. Here the archers slipped their arrows back in their quivers, and they all gathered along the watchtowers, unsheathed their siphos, beating them against their shields in unison with the sounds coming up from the great ships, the likes of which the warriors upon the walls of Themyscira had never seen. It was a great spectacle to witness. It were as if these mighty ships were sent by Poseidon himself to deliver these ladies home from across the sea. Aww. When Queen Thera and her women heard the beating of swords against shields coming back to them from the walls, a great cheer arose up from the heartened women who sheathed their swords, embracing one another with kisses on the cheeks, bright beaming smiles. No one was more elated than their queen, and Admiral Vasha watched her as she seemed to glow radiant, a light of pure delight there upon the deck of his ship underneath the moonlight. As pleased as he was for his dear Thera, Vasha felt the pain of her loss already, for soon he would give the order to drop anchor and send the women to shore and 3 small landing vessels. And as Vasha knew he would, King Viacles went with the landing party, and his men rowed all the ladies onto the shore. Everything seemed to rush by for Queen Thera, for though she had waited for this moment to be standing on the sands of her homeland for what seemed an eternity, while she was away, all was a rush of voices and cheers and laughter. Oh, I'm getting little sniffles. Now, before Thera could stop and appreciate this moment, the gates were thrown open to her as cheers and praise of love were shouted by the elated women inside the walls who had come from the far corners of Queen Thera's realm to welcome their new queen home. However, before Queen Thera entered in, she paused, telling King Viacles to wait until morning, when she would see that he and his men would be served breakfast on the beach in the light of the new day. The king watched as the mother of his child went into her walled city in a shower of rose petals and strawberry blossoms, as the mothers of daughters, sisters, cousins rejoiced at the sight of the new Themysciran queen, who was beloved amongst all her people. Okay, so that's continuing with chapter 25. King Viacles was left on the shores of Themyscira outside the gates. He watched and waited upon the beach as Admiral Vasha sent his crew out back and forth from the ship to shore with the cargo of tribute for Queen Thera and her nation. A tent was erected outside the walls for King of Sparta and his bodyguards. Admiral Vasha and his crew spent the long night aboard the warships. Now here, gathered around a large campfire, Viacles sat, eating olives and drinking a bit of wine, commenting to a few of his men sitting on the sand next to him. "These walls are immense," Viacles remarked at the height and length of the massive structure, which, by what Thera had told him, were 4 miles long, 8 feet thick, and nearly 50,000 women inside. "All those women? And no man has ever stepped foot inside there?" Kai, one of Viacles' most favored guards, said as he stared up at the 3-story structure, where he saw a few officers walking about next to the watchtowers, which were lit up by 4 torches on each of the 4 corners of all the towers. "So they say," the king of Sparta said, with a stretch and a yawn. Stretch. "Surely these women could have not possibly constructed these fortifications. Is such a task even possible by a race of women?" Kai balked at the very notion. "Who can say?" Viacles wondered. Now, as the men sat chatting before they rested for the night, the evening found Queen Thera on the other side of the wall. A silver war horse was brought out from the royal stables for the new queen to ride into Colchis on the west coast of her territory. When the animal was led to the queen, she refused to climb up in the saddle, saying loudly, so the hundreds gathered there could hear her voice, "I have journeyed far and slept little, but I will walk with my good ladies and all you gathered here, so I might lead you back to our home." A great cheer rose up from the crowd, a roar so loud King Viacles and his men pricked up their ears at the sound. True to her word, Queen Thera walked ahead of her people there on the road. Amara, the captain of the archer, Lexa, the captain of the cavalry, walked out just behind the queen, and the rest of the returning greeting party from Sparta followed in the long procession to the Artemisian lake in the center of Colchis. Here the women joined the returning parties of Scythia and Dardina. The groups from Macedon and Illyria would not return for 3 more days. Now here the captain of the phalanx, Lucia Vega, delighted to see her dear friend there. Thera, who was now queen. She approached Queen Thera, who was attired for full battle in her armor, hair slicked back, golden crown upon her head. My queen, Captain Lucia Vega shouted loudly as she drew nearer to her, and with a deep bow, Captain Vega reached out and embraced the queen. The hands of the fates have brought you home to us, queen. Our new leader, she said in a joyous voice, which was met with praise of cheer. Queen Thera was only pleased to see the captain of the phalanx, the only one. Queen Thera was pleased to see the captain of the phalanx. The only one missing was Lacuna, captain of the charioteers. Captain Vega, the queen said in a serious tone, tell me at once, what news of Thrace? The king and queen of Thrace have sent a message of condolence for Themyscira's great loss. He and his wife send greetings of peace and gifts of rare spices and myrrh. Captain Vega was proud to impart this news to her worried queen. Also, the returning women have been sent by armed escort from Scythia and Dardina, along with messages of hope for new treaties on trade and commerce between our nations. The armed guards are encamped outside the north gate and await your word. Commander Odessa is riding out from Themyscira with your counselors with all these documents. Are the Scythians and Dardanians not a mite bit presumptuous to wish to begin such discussion of these matters? Queen Thera remarked, feeling a bit insulted. Well, my queen, with new leadership comes changing times. Many of our customs have been cast to the wayside over the years, Captain Vega informed her, noting to herself their new queen walked in and did not ride into the city, as was the custom of all queens. Here Queen Thera placed her hands on her hips and shook her head a little. Putting the future of trade agreements and peace treaties far from her mind, Queen Thera and her ladies were brought into the city for the ritual cleansing, as was the custom for those returning from battle or breeding. However, Thera was brought into the temple of Artemis, where she was taken by the priestesses into the clear circular pool in the center of the columned temple, and there under the stars by the light of the waning moon, Thera, daughter of Artemis, servant of Apollo, heiress of Ithera, ruler of Themyscira, was placed naked in the cold holy waters of the temple and blessed by the acolytes of Artemis and Apollo, as ancient prayers were given up to the goddess of the moon and her brother, the sun Apollo. Okay, so that's going to end chapter 25. Thera has made it home. There is no war. But, oh Lord, what is to come? So, once again, I invite you to go to my YouTube channel and like and subscribe, because it makes my day. It fills my heart with a little bit of joy. So I hope you can find a little bit of joy today and place that in your heart and keep it warm wherever you go. See you later.